The Spin-Off Podcast Network.
Talofa lava. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Kia ora koutou katoa and welcome to Business is Boring. 6 years ago, a finance industry insider was looking at the newish KiwiSaver scheme and seeing a rort. The government-mandated program saw people being enrolled in offers provided by big incumbents who were taking big fees and delivering what he saw as below-par service and returns. Knowing the power of compounding benefits and the power of index funds, he thought there could be a way to make a scheme that took super low fees and passed the savings on to the customers, leading to more money and dignity in their retirements. Unlike most providers, they set up as a not-for-profit, and so began Simplicity, with what you could probably call a great case of gamekeeper turned poacher. CEO and founder Sam Stubbs has so far delivered some of the best returns in the industry, highest customer satisfaction, and a raft of new investment options that are designed to make a return and improve the economic picture in all of Aotearoa, like build-to-rent and friendly mortgages for members. From beginning as an outsider, last year's Simplicity was made a default KiwiSaver scheme, meaning it's now one of the scheme's new members are automatically enrolled in, a huge endorsement for their mission and results. To talk the journey, financial literacy, and what else is now possible thanks to their work, Sam Stubbs joins us now. Tēnā koe, thank you for being here.
Kia ora.
Hey, so first up, tell us about your start. As, you know, if you look at your CV, you came into the finance industry through probably the other end of things when it comes to running money, hey, like Fay Rich White and Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
Tell me about getting into that world and what it was like when you joined it.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, you know, I'm a Westie, right? And I'm a real Westie. I'm not one of these, you know, fancy pants, Te Atatu, North Westies like an outrageous fortune. I come from Sunnyvale, where it's the real West Auckland. And, you know, look, I made one amazing decision in life. You know, I chose my parents well, right? So they were a couple of school teachers. And growing up in Sunnyvale was a really interesting experience because back in those days, it was sort of what I call the working poor, right? So there weren't a lot of people unemployed, but there was very little extra money. And there was, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that you just wouldn't accept now. You know, there's a lot of inherent racism, a lot of violence, all that sort of stuff. And but that's a really good schooling, you know, for someone, because you learn it's basically survival on one level, it's opportunism on another level because there's not much around. You make do with what you've got, and it teaches you adaptability as well, right? So and in many ways, of course, it was also a sort of a bucolic existence because back then West Auckland still had orchards and parks and all this sort of stuff. So I started out actually going, I mean, I was a sort of a thin, nerdy kid in a really tough school, Kelston Boys, a big rugby school. And so, you know, that was Law of the Jungle a bit there. I did learn survival. And then I popped out of there into university and I actually studied politics and philosophy. I didn't have a single financial qualification at all. And then when I popped out of that, I just basically looked for a job that would teach me about business. For some reason, I liked business. I bought my first share at age 12, and I was always like going to get money because money was scarce. I was always working, you know, supermarket shelves at night and wire stripping factories and all. I was always going and getting jobs part-time. And so I just took a job with IBM, and they trained me for about a couple of years, and then they had the first voluntary redundancy scheme anywhere in the world for IBM. So I got paid a lot of money to leave, and I thought, this is just awesome. Yeah, exactly. So got this big check, and then, big check for me, right? It's probably about $10,000. And then they had these internships for this company called Fay Rich White. And back then, look, I'd like to say that this was a calculated bet. It wasn't. Fay Rich White was just in the media because they were sponsoring the America's Cup, and they had this big fancy building on Queen Street, and they seemed to drive faster cars and go out with prettier girls than I did. So I just went into this world of investment banking for all the wrong reasons. It was basically it was just I saw an opportunity and I went into it, and I thought the finance industry looks pretty interesting. And then when I got in there, it was really interesting. I mean, it was really genuinely interesting. Those were the buccaneering days of finance, right? Now, we didn't know that fundamentally we were doing some pretty wrong things for the country, actually. But the whole world went down this massive, market economy. Free enterprise is always right. You can't do anything wrong by letting these sort of almost pirates in a way determine the economy, and that was fueled, of course, by politics because you had the whole, Roger Douglas, Rogernomics type mentality permeating through the economy at that point. So. And even though that was post the big crash, right, it was still there. There was still the aftermath of that. So, look, I got involved in that, and I had, 4 or 5 pretty good years there. And then I got married, and my wife got posted to London. She was with Foreign Affairs. Then I went there, and then I got transferred actually with the outfit I was working for at the time to London, which was really nice. And then Goldman Sachs came and sort of poached me. Yeah.
What an amazing, time to hit that industry as well. As I guess at that moment, now if you tell people how closed New Zealand was in the early 80s compared to the early 90s, the change in New Zealand was absolutely massive over that kind of 10, 15-year period.
It was huge. And look, and there's some really good things that came from that too, right? Like there's no question that had we carried on down the old path, I don't think we would have been, look, there were good and bad, right? There would have been I think we would have been a more egalitarian society, but I think we would have overall all been poorer off. So I think there's pluses and minuses, but people forget that back when Muldoon was in charge, price of cars were imported with restrictions. You had to go into a waiting list to buy a car. You couldn't get foreign exchange. The price of everything was regulated. I mean, it was an unbelievable, you would almost call it a communist economy.
With a few oligarchs who had licenses to import things.
Incredible.
And so an incredibly limited government mandated kind of you can be.
Yeah.
But and then you hear from these people as well, the trickle-down idea. People thought that they were helping the world by getting rich because it would end up trickling down, but it wasn't really.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. So there was, the one thing I've learned in my life is that people are always going to get their eye on the main chance, right? So entrepreneurialism, capitalism, whatever you call it, someone's always going to try and take advantage of whatever policy settings there are, tax settings there are. So there's always going to be people getting rich, right? And in an exploitative way, but also some people getting rich in a really constructive, positive way as well. So I don't sort of have a strong ideological view on that, other than as a general rule, when you allow people to flourish, you create circumstances by which people can flourish. They will. Yeah, they want to.
Someone will come in and do that.
Yeah.
And so you went and worked for these, big names in investment banking, and then you found yourself back in New Zealand. Paint a picture for me for what was it that took you out of being a big figure on the finance industry side, which is really built about information, asymmetrical information. Like the people in the finance industry know more, and so they make a whole lot of money, and normal people don't know much and they pay a whole lot of fees. The finance industry wins either way. And so you come from that world, and what did you look and see with the new KiwiSaver program and the problem that you wanted to solve? Yeah,
so look, it's simplicity really is probably a result of my midlife crisis, to be honest with you. So it was actually driven it wasn't a rational look at the finance industry. It was a deep look at myself about what I wanted to what I wanted the rest of my life to stand for, because I was on a little bit of a hedonistic treadmill there. And it was becoming patently aware to me that making more money was not making me happier. In fact, it was making me unhappier. And that was because, I had to go back to Sunnyvale. I had to go right back to those values that I had inherited as a child, and me getting richer and effectively wrapping my world in cotton wool, preventing myself from getting exposed to the daily reality. Because I think that's what a lot of rich people do. They insulate themselves from reality, right? They hide themselves in quiet cars and gated communities and only go on holidays with their friends and so on. And so they create this false reality to, in many cases, and certainly in my case, to justify their existence. They knew inherently there was something wrong with that. And so it took was kind of like an earthquake in my life, which was a divorce, to basically come to terms with what I wanted in life. And basically what I wanted in life was to do what I was doing. I mean, there were all these skills that you inherit and so on. And, the world of money can be fun because you can actually help change people's lives, A little bit more money gives you choices in life, and those choices give you dignity, right? You can really help change New Zealand positively. But to do it in a way where I was basically giving back to the people of Sunnyvale, I was giving back. So in many ways, I'm one part finance person, but I'm also one part charity worker and social enterprise worker. And then in another very really important part of that is I'm also part of an amazing team. So that's super cool. When you get a team of people united around a common mission, it's very powerful. So, which is why I think social enterprise will transform capitalism. This is the next wave, and we can talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so that was the process I went through, and I think a lot of businesses. It's interesting. We worship youth, right? We think that startups are young people who have a good idea and a technological edge, but there's a whole lot of innovation comes from a whole lot of different places, including people like me in my late 40s in that case, who decide that, there is this thing called wisdom and experience, if channeled properly with an amazing team of people, can also do this fun stuff. The only entrepreneurs aren't. There are entrepreneurs all the way through life, yeah. We see this in some of the charities we fund, by the way. Most amazing ideas come out of people in retirement, yeah. So, so that was sort of my journey. But, look, I'm just a Westie, mate. It's there's nothing special or,
Tell me about the coming together of those two ideas of, most of the industry, especially the default providers in the beginning, that were taking these great big fees and getting lower returns and having lower customer satisfaction than the average in the industry.
Yeah.
And so that's one problem. And then the second problem of, trying to actively manage and delivering low returns when index funds could give low fees that you could then pass on. Yeah. Tell me about bringing those two ideas together, because that was very new in the KiwiSaver approach in New Zealand.
Yeah, look, so look, one of these things is simply a fact, and it's that, if you belong to a club and the club is awesome for the people in the club, you don't leave the club, and you tell everybody, it's not that good in this club, you don't want to join this club, right? So the world of fund management and finance is a club. It's a club of people who've worked out that this is extremely lucrative, highly advantageous for the people who belong, and so they run it as a club, and it's a very high fee club. I mean, look, look at the banks, for example. The last time I looked at it, the banks were at 4 of the 5 most profitable companies in the country. So top figures, so go figure. Why is that? And they say it's because we're big, we're massive. And actually, not really, no. It's because actually you exist in a system and you take advantage of a system that basically thrives on ignorance. Where, lots of fancy billboards with happy families jumping into swimming pools is how the banks advertise, because they don't want you to know the ugly truth of how profitable the business is. So, and that happens all through fund management too. So KiwiSaver is it's a wonderful institution. It will transform New Zealand. But it is managed by a bunch of people who realise, oh yeah, we can see a massive growth here. Everyone's saving money. Here's an opportunity for us to make money in a way which will not seem that expensive, but is actually incredibly expensive. So KiwiSaver is wonderful, but the fees are a total rip-off. And and I'll give you an example of it. This is a really simple way how you can understand it. So most people would say, 1% doesn't sound very much as a fee. 1% sounds little, right? But let's put this into perspective. The government says that you can expect about a 4.5% return off a growth fund over your lifetime. That's what you reasonably expect. So if you make $4.50 and the fee is 1%, so it means for every $4.50 you make, $1 goes to the fund manager. So suddenly 1% is more like, 22, 23%. So if I told you your fees aren't 1%, they're 22% of everything you make. You go, hold on. That starts to feel more like a tax, doesn't it? And that 1% last year led to, I think it was about $670 million of KiwiSaver fees for the providers. And it gets bigger and bigger as it grows and grows. It's huge. I mean, it's a massive amount of money.
And that's, for 1 year, that's a lot, right? But that's $600 million. If even 2/3 of that, that's another $400 million that's sitting there that could be compounding in the benefit that it gives people into retirement. And that becomes an enormous number.
It's absolutely huge. In fact, here's an example. So, this recent debacle about GST on KiwiSaver fees, right? What the eye-opener was that little bit of extra GST on that fee, how many hundreds of millions and then how many billions that added up to in terms of taking Kiwis' wealth away. I think that's what shocked people. So people should take that shock and translate it into the fees they're being charged. I'll give you another interesting fact on that. A lot of people assume that it's expensive running a KiwiSaver manager. Well, let me give you the example of why it's not. First of all, there's no capital required. So you don't have to put what we call regulatory capital aside to be a fund manager. You can just do it from day one. Secondly, it's a very high-tech business. You don't have to spend that much money. You don't need bricks and mortar or shops or whatever. So I'll give you an example. Simplicity set up, and I personally funded it. And at our worst drawdown, so the worst point of loss for us, we had spent $650,000. And then we started climbing up, and now we're, making a cash surplus every month. So that's an example of how cheaply you can set up a big business. And in the finance industry, I think that's the great misconception is that finance is expensive to get into, and it is not. It does not require a lot of capital. It does not require a lot of money, and yet suddenly you can get yourself into a game which is highly, highly lucrative. There is a reason why so many smart people are in the finance industry. They have made a risk-adjusted, calculated decision. This is how I get paid the most for taking the least risk. By the way, that's exactly why I got into the industry as well, right?
You can set up shop and then other people bring you their money. You make money off having their money. And then if they lose money, you lose nothing. And if they make money, you gain more. Seems like a good deal.
Dude, you said it absolutely beautifully. And it is a gravy train which very rarely goes off the rails, right?
And so having had that idea, and especially with the index fund idea, which you started with, where there's already, funds that track markets and over time taking a view of tracking the entire market or a large portion of it rather than trying to pick winners is going to do better for most people. And people like Buffett have put big bets up on people saying, you're never going to outperform a tracker. And people aren't doing that because they can't take the fees or what's
I mean, this is the other huge sort of lie of our industry, right? Which is that you can actually add value by picking the direction of markets. Let me ask you a question, Simon. What's the market going to do next year?
Yeah,
no one has.
You can't pick a pandemic. You can't pick a war in Ukraine. You can't pick anything.
It's a fool's game, and yet a bunch of people try and fool you by thinking that they can actually work out what will happen. Now, so let's not use words. Let's use data to prove this, right? So the reason why Simplicity, which is a non-profit owned by a charity, right? So we're not making any money out of this. We just entirely set ourselves up to make New Zealanders wealthier. They get all of the benefits of scale. So why do we manage money in that way? It's because the data, and Standard & Poor's have done this over a very long time, over 30 years now. It's called the SPIVA studies. These are the studies that no fund manager will ever tell you about. But actually, they're a very comprehensive set of data which works out which active fund managers, picking markets, how well have they outperformed just buying the whole market and charging the lowest fee. And the statistics broadly are, it depends a little bit on where you are around the world, but very roughly, in any 1 year, 80% of people who try to beat the markets will fail to do so. Not because they don't beat the markets, but because after the high fees, they don't beat the market. And then over 30 years, the statistic of that jumps down to below 5% chance of actually beating the market over 30 years. Now, most people in KiwiSaver are investing for 30, 40 years, right? So would you bet on a 5% chance of winning? Would you bet on a 20% chance of winning in any 1 year? It's a fool's game, right?
You're not even betting on yourself. You're betting on who knows who to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And even if they're wonderful, and we have some wonderful local managers, like Milford Asset Management, they're a wonderful local active manager. But you know what? They change. The people change. And these are people making subjective choices about where markets go. And so it's highly unlikely. I mean, even Warren Buffett will die, right? So if you are lucky enough to pick that guy, is the next person going to... In fact, statistically, the chances of you getting 2 or 3 generations of this are extremely low. So it's simple maths. It's a simple quantitative process that you look at, which says how will you make people the most amount of money. Now, by the way, the reason we chose this is for that reason, but here's the consequence. It's incredibly boring. It's the tortoise strategy. You're not doing much, right? In terms of doing it, you're just investing in the index and you just add up. It's a very simple thing to do. It's done by computer. There's some smart people at our work doing it, but the process is very simple. You can't charge a big fat fee. You can't create this illusion of adding value. You can't talk about market directions and fancy charts and we love this company and so on and so forth. You can't do that, right?
And so you can't jet off to go and see the management and wrought trips, junkets all around the world.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly.
So beautiful hotels and plane rides.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've gone, in my career at Goldman Sachs, I was literally flying around in the Rolling Stones jet, being all fancy pantsy, and now I'm, flying, I have been flying Jetstar down to, all around the country. So it's really boring. In fact, the title of this podcast, Business is Boring. Our business is very boring. And because boring businesses actually are usually spectacular long-term businesses. And in this case, that's the case. So that's what we chose to do. How do we make the most amount of money? And over time, it is already starting to play out, but over time, it will just, this is tortoise versus hare stuff. And when you're investing billions and billions of dollars of other people's money, you have a fiduciary responsibility to look after them, not look after yourself. The problem is that most of our industry looks after itself first, then the customers later, not the other way around.
Yeah, and we'll be back in a moment to hear from Sam Stubbs how they built Simplicity and what they're now able to achieve next. Spark is proud to partner with the Sustainable Business Network and the Climate Action Toolbox. The free Climate Action Toolbox can provide you with simple step-by-step guides to measure and reduce your emissions. Help lead the way to a low-carbon future for New Zealand. Visit sparklab.co.nz/sustainability to find out more.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market. the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
And we're back with Sam Stubbs of Simplicity. So today you've got 4.5 billion odd under management, 130,000 odd members. You're saving about 40 million a year in fees that your customers would otherwise be losing every year. And you've provided 4.5 million of the kind of fees to charities that you're able to help to provide. That is a massive impact to have built to, and like we were saying before, have become one of the default schemes. How do you build to that point?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I had no playbook on this, right? So because I've just worked for other people, big organisations. So look, the first magic is our team. So I happen to be the face of the business and the voice of it. But if the four founders of this business, Amanda, my partner, Amir, and Andrew, my real name's Arthur too, so it was the four A's. They were critical, right? This business would have died had it been just me. So we're all co-founders of the business. So I think that was the most amazing thing, is get an impassioned group of people around, right? Because 1 + 1 = 3 when it comes to setting up in business. So many times we worship the founder culture, right? But I can guarantee you Elon Musk would be nowhere, or Jeff Bezos would be nowhere near where they were without an incredible bunch of people. So that was the first thing, getting together the first key 3 or 4 people. And then, there's a really interesting thing about setting up in business. I see so many people who pitch to us now, because we get a lot of pitches for startups and funding them. And I see complex balance sheets and profit and losses and all these sort of things. And basically, the lesson we learned is all you do is you just become paranoid about managing to cash. All that matters is money coming in this month and money going out the next month. And then you have to be incredibly nimble on your feet, right? So the process of innovation, I love the way Steve Jobs talked about it actually. He said, look, in Apple, we don't sit down and say, in 10 years' time, this is where we'll be and these are the products we will do. We started out with the Apple I, then it was the Apple II, then we got into phones, then we got into watches, then we got into tablets, and we knew none of this. So it's a very random process and it's opportunistic. And so we've done a couple of things, I think, which is basically grab the opportunities when we saw them. Second thing is to fail fast, because we've had some stuff which has gone wrong. So we've just basically pulled the pin very quickly on that. And then you begin this random process of innovation. But if you have amazing people there, you kind of work it out. And I don't think there's any hard and fast rules about how you innovate, other than get a cool group of people together, be paranoid about managing to cash. And this is like, we were around my kitchen table and then we're around the lounge table. There's no fancy offices, no studying out. And we were, and we have this, we still have it, what we call the Simplicity begging bowl. We asked for everything for nothing. We've had 67 volunteers in our business over the years, and we have some, we've just been actually gifted a company worth well in excess of $100 million, and part of that is just asking for help. One of the interesting things I think that entrepreneurs don't realise when they set up is that everybody wants you to do well, and everybody wants to help you do well. So there's just been some incredible, gifting of ideas and labour and so on.
And does everyone want you to do well more if you are set up as a not-for-profit with a charity off the back of it, and you have such a strong purpose there?
I think so. I think so. And I think customers want you to do well too. This is the interesting power of social enterprise. Look, I'm fundamentally a capitalist, right? And everything that Simplicity invests in is designed to make a profit. But the really interesting observation, or the thing I've learned over the last 6 years, more so than, there are 2 things I've learned. One is the power of teamwork. it's just incredible. And by the way, I've worked for some incredible teams in my life, but nothing like this. The second one is the power of social enterprise. And what I mean by that is I think it's actually going to redefine capitalism now. And we are an example of this. Like, how can someone go in the finance industry from 6 years to go from where we started to where we are? Well, think about the model, right? And think about social enterprises generally. They have some incredible competitive commercial advantages. The first is you don't need to make a dollar. You don't need to make a profit. Now, that's huge, right? That means that we can price our products at about a third of our competitors. So that's a huge commercial advantage. That's just like selling a tin of baked beans at 1/3 the price, right? And generally it's the same tin of baked beans. That's the first thing. The second thing is you tend to get the very best of talent in these things because people get smarter. And so the younger generation now, they don't have my dream. My dream was get rich, buy a house, then buy an investment property, bada. Their dream now is, you know what, I really value freedom. I really actually want the world to be a better place. I want my skills to be used for purpose, and I want to be paid fairly. I don't have to own a house. I might want to rent it for the rest of my life. Different mindset, smarter mindset about the world they want to live in, much more environmentally aware, all that stuff. People like me, I'm 57 now, it's so easy to become old and curmudgeonly and say, these young people, they don't know what they're talking about. They know it. That's rubbish. They're smarter and better than our generation.
And find any person in their 50s across all of history who was like, you know what, this next generation looked great.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the answers.
Yeah. Well, I'm one.
Yeah.
I mean, I would much rather this generation's in charge of the world than my generation. Right?
You're a rarity.
Yeah, because I mean, as I say to call them kids these days. I say to kids, look, we gave you the internet, so we're not all bad, but we also screwed the environment for you, so we apologise for that. That's your challenge now. But so you don't have to make a profit. You can get the very best people. But here's the other thing. Here's the other interesting thing, and this is where technology is changing capitalism in a way which I think is much more interesting than just fancier laptops and self-driving cars. When you have technology-driven businesses, they tend not to have what we call bricks and mortars. You don't have to build factories. You don't need shops. You don't need that stuff. That means you can build businesses which can explode in growth, change the industry that they are taking, but actually doesn't take very much money. And so you can suddenly run tech businesses as social enterprises. So I think the next Apple, Google, or Microsoft will actually be a social enterprise. And let me give you an example in New Zealand, right? How enduring, because social enterprises tend to be forever companies, right? So as we say, it's simplicity. Look, we don't make a dollar, therefore we'll never be worth a dollar. Therefore, will never be bought or sold. We're going to be around for 100 years. Why do we know this? Because the model we copied was Southern Cross. Look at Southern Cross. Has been around for 100 years, but here's the big thing about Southern Cross. 75% of the medical insurance market. It's completely dominant. Why? Because it's a social enterprise. Because fundamentally it can underprice its competitors and it has a very long-term view on things. So think about the power of social enterprise, and we are one. How can we have grown so fast and be so competitive in price and win the key customer service awards every year? It's because we're a social enterprise. We attract the best people. We can charge much less, and we have a much longer term view on things. And I think that the whole tech world, which has grown up on the romance of making people rich via stock options, I think that was the first wave. The next wave is going to be people turning around and saying, hey, I can actually make a better world by setting up a company. We can pay ourselves fairly, but we can be massively competitive versus all these other industries via a social enterprise model. And to give you an idea of the scale of this, simplicity is only 6 years old. We've only just started. If people think that we're a player, you have no idea, because we have a 100-year view on things. We don't have to make a dollar, so all the benefits of scale. So if people always talk about how low our fees are, I think they're way too high. I want them to go down a lot with scale. And then it allows us to take an incredibly long-term view in, for example, housing, affordable housing. It allows in terms of providing low-cost mortgages. All of these things are possible because we're a social enterprise. Hugely competitive.
Yeah, let's talk about those things as the normal vanity metrics that funds have, number of amount under management and all the rest, you've got those. But the kind of coolest thing, I think, is the cultural change that you're leading in the industry. So you've been the first fund to, I believe, the first fund to start having an alternative investment part of your funds, so things like VC. You're doing build to rent, and so that's a massive thing for society, and like when you have that long-term view. Tell me about, and you've done a lot of that within, lots of people might take a little bit longer to start building out innovations like that. You've done it all very quickly while you're doing everything else, like scaling and growing and the normal thing. Tell me about being able to actually use capital in a way that has a bit of a conscience to it, because that's not how capital normally operates.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So it's one of those things where you can actually make money and do good. It is possible. And in fact, you know what? It's what people want you to do with their money. They want to think that they are investing it and doing some social good. That's the thing that our industry hasn't cottoned on to. Right now, what they're all saying is, listen, we're all ESG, we're all environmental, all that. So they've got that stage one. But stage two is actually much more bricks and mortar. So let me give you an example of this. Think about a mortgage, for example, if you take out a mortgage. Now, mortgages are funded by term depositors, put money in the banks, and the banks lend it to borrowers. So the term depositor comes in and gets, say, 3%. And then the bank adds on 2% and gives you a mortgage at 5%, right? So the person supplying the money gets 3%, the bank gets 2%, just because it acts in the middle. It's an intermediary, right? So we said, stuff that. That's just a rip-off. It's a rip-off for the investors in the bank. The term deposits are too low and the mortgages are too high. So what we do is we just we use some of our KiwiSaver money, and we will give them, say, 4% return, and we will lend it to the borrower at 4%, which is tiny amount of operating costs. And so that means that the person borrowing, and so far, since we've set up, they pay about 1% less on average in their mortgage, and the person in the KiwiSaver fund earns more than if we'd put that money into the bank in term deposits. It's a classic win-win. But who loses there? The banks. No one's making any money out of this. Everyone is, you're making money for your investors, but you're also doing good by providing low-cost mortgages. Now, what's interesting about that is Simon, is you call that innovative. You know what? That's what building societies used to do. That's what thrift societies used to do. That's actually what the Knights Templar used to do thousands of years ago. This is a business model about members looking after members, acting in a cooperative way. It's thousands of years old. We're just doing it with technology effectively, right? So these ideas which are innovative, there's an interesting thing we have in Simplicity. We hate new ideas. We don't have a single new idea there. We just take what's worked in history and takes what's worked overseas and brought it to New Zealand with two huge competitive advantages, well, three really huge competitive advantages. One is a long-term view. We have a 100-year view. So we're building affordable houses that we will own or intend to own for 100 years. So we're building them to last 100 years, by the way. They're much better built because we'll own them. The second thing, so we have a very long-term perspective. The second thing is we don't need to make money for ourselves. So all of the benefits of scale go back to the people who are supplying the money, and a little bit of that benefit to the people who are using the products like mortgages or homes. So with long-term view, we don't have to make any money. And here's the other thing. Billions and soon to be tens of billions of dollars to invest in a manner. So imagine the scale of the goodness that you can do, right? So, we announced building affordable homes in September. We've already got 159 in build now. We've built the land for another 450, and our intention is to be building 1,000 homes a year. We hope to be building 1,000 homes a year within 3 years, and then to eventually own 10,000 homes around the country for rent, and therefore create another option for people, for retirees who might want to rent for the rest of their lives as opposed to going to a retirement home, young people saving for home, or quite frankly, so someone who just wants to rent for the rest of their lives, which is what happens in Spain, Germany, France, or, all around the world, right?
Yeah, places where people don't have the great Bernard Hickey line that New Zealand's got a housing market with the, economy bolted on the end of it. Countries that aren't obsessed and only invest in property, unproductive assets.
So so let me give you an example, and just in affordable housing, because we're not only going to transform the finance industry, and I think we will be, at the end of it, we'll be the biggest finance company in the country eventually, just like Southern Cross are the biggest medical insurer. I think we might also be the biggest house builder with the possible exception of the government. And here's why. You look at the economics of what we're doing right now. Because we can fund all of this without borrowing money, we can just fund it with our KiwiSaver members' savings, and because we what we call vertically integrate, so we control everything. We own the building company, we build the houses, we operate them, we rent them, we maintain them. We're now building in Auckland apartments with an average value of about $450,000. So it's about 30 to 40% lower than the market price because we're not making any profit and because we have economies of scale. They're also built to last twice the building code. So they're built out of concrete and brick, and they're built to last 100 years. Why? Because we'll actually own them for 100 years, right? And we actually spend more than we need to in order to get them to last that long. So, for example, we put concrete roofs on top because it makes them warmer and drier, and in 50 years' time when we need to replace the roof, people can stay in the apartments. You know, there's all that sort of long-term thinking.
And that kind of long-term thinking is something that, like, I'm really positive about New Zealand's long-term possibilities. For a big part of that is because of the increasing role of iwi in the economy. Because we'll be one of these few countries in the world that has capital with a long-term moral view as opposed to an amoral view where it just goes and disappears and you know, distorts the world. And I think that you look at places like China or like Norway and, you know, countries that do have a social view of capital and it's significant in their economy end up being better places for the people in them.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So you have a look at the New Zealand economy, right? So for so long, our wealth has been tied up in our houses. So when something affects the housing market, we're incredibly passionate about it, right? But when something else happens in the economy, that's someone else's, some rich guy or some foreigner or whatever. As KiwiSavers, as we continue to invest in the hood, right? And, you know, here's the really interesting thing. Do you know how the number of days that Simplicity has sold things in the market to finance people taking their money out? 0. We've been net investors every single day, all through COVID, all through market downturns and so on. That's really interesting, isn't it? And that's the same for all KiwiSaver investors. So there's this rising tide of capital coming into New Zealand, and we're buying back New Zealand in a sense, because our economic history has been tidal waves of foreign capital coming and going and creating instability and uncertainty. And so if you look at, and this is why I'm incredibly positive about New Zealand. I mean, you know, I know there's all this bad news out there right now, but I think we're about to hit the next 30 years would possibly be the most prosperous in our history. It'd be a great time to be in New Zealand. And the reason I say that is if you look at the amount of money that's coming in, we're going from being capital poor to capital rich. And, you know, the problems of wealth are way better than the problems of poverty, right? You know, so having more money, money solves a lot of problems. Not all problems, but it helps solve a lot. The second thing is if you have a look at history, I mean, I'm not just, you know, pulling this out of the air as naive optimism, because look at Australia. When Australia started saving in the 1970s into their superannuation funds, Australia is a commodity country just like New Zealand. You know, we have milk, they have iron ore, right? You would have thought the economies would have bounced up and down and been quite volatile. Australia had 26 years without recession. 26 years, didn't matter what happened to the price of iron ore or coal or whatever. And that was because their superannuation funds were continually reinvesting in the economy. High growth companies, they were building skyscrapers, all that sort of stuff. It's why, for instance, if you go to Brisbane, a city which is not too far from Auckland in terms of size, Brisbane's way richer. Better roads, better buildings, better infrastructure, so on. So we're about to hit that period. This is going to be an awesome time to be in New Zealand because suddenly we will have money to do the stuff we want to do in a whole lot of areas.
You make things sound very simple. And I love the way that you say, you know, we like old ideas. We don't like these untested things. We like things that are simple. And you've said before that, you know, the finance world is like any other priesthood, you know, that people like to have mystery and confusion to get one over you. Yeah. You've also in the past talked about kind of the recipe for having a good financial life, and that's a big mission of yours, and you've recently published a book and, you know, made it really widely available for that same idea of helping people have a better financial life. Like, what is the, you know, what is the, like, the elevator pitch for having a better financial life?
Yeah. Well, it's the first thing, look, it's a mindset, right? So the first thing is, and I'm sorry, this is what I'm just going to ask you to trust me, right? Money is really simple. I know right now that people think that, you know, the number one source of worry seems to be money worries, right? And a lot of that is out of ignorance and inability to understand what got you into that problem and how to get out of it. And there are some incredibly well-meaning people who write a lot of really interesting stuff about how to do this, but they tend not to cut through to people who, if you want to read these books and learn and you're curious, you're generally not the sort of person who has money worries, right? The people who have money worries are the people who are scared, uninformed, ignorant, and our industry has treated them shamefully, really, because they haven't demystified money. What they've actually, as you say, created this priesthood. They've created this illusion that it's difficult. Give us your money and we'll sort it out.
Where there's mystery, there's margin.
A great line. I love that. Do you mind if I steal that one?
I stole it from someone and
that's
I love
awesome.
it. I use it all the time. Isn't it great?
That's awesome. That's awesome. But that's absolutely true. So what we're doing is demystifying money. So the first thing is to realise that actually you will be okay with money. You can be okay with money. It can be your friend, not your enemy. And it can buy you a lot of, and we all know what having money does. It's cool. So that's the first thing, is the mindset, which is to say, I'm actually capable of mastering this. The second thing is realizing there's only a few things you need to get right. It's not that complex. And in fact, in this book, it's 100 pages, so you can read it in an hour. It's how I manage my life. And I've been all through all the complexities of money and tried all these sorts of things. And I've settled down to a very simple, repeatable formula, which quite frankly means I don't worry about money. That is the biggest thing, right? The biggest goal here is not to get rich. It's to not worry about money. It's to actually get on with the rest of life, to get on with the people and the fun and the places, the things that actually genuinely make you happy. Because, and I'm just one of many people who will tell you that being rich does not make you happy. You think that, but it doesn't. It in fact can make you positively unhappy. But so I think this whole thing is about demystifying it.
Yeah, being rich doesn't make you happy, but being poor does make you miserable.
Oh, and that sucks. Yeah, poverty sucks. Yeah, totally. But but once you're out of poverty, and I think my partner Amanda, who's she's an expert in this area. She says that the surveys tell you that about $100,000 a year in income after that. Your happiness goes down, not up. So you think that having more money, and that's certainly been my personal experience too. So demystifying it, making it simple, and just saying to people, you know what, it is okay to come into this world. You will be okay here. You belong here. It's okay for you to understand the basics of money and apply them to your life, and then basically ignore the rest. Get the basics right. It's like everything in life, right? If you get the basics right, it'll be okay. It'll be good. And so this is not trying to be the Bible. It's not trying to tell you everything, but it's saying, let's just get these basic things sorted out and you'll be okay.
What are the basics?
Oh, really simple, mate. So, they're really, and you hear them again and again and again, right? So I should actually dig out the book, but we don't have the time. But it's really simple. Look, I think it's very simple. First of all, is get the habits in life right. So first of all is pay down your debt. Like, debt sucks, man. The only debt that you should have, in my opinion, if you possibly can, is a mortgage, because that's good debt. That's working for you, increasing your wealth. And take on a student loan if that means you're going to get qualifications, which means you will make money, right? Those are the two forms of acceptable debt. All other debt is bad. Don't let anyone convince you. Credit card debt stinks. Personal loans stink. Car loans. Anything that you borrow money.
Watch out for buy now, pay later.
There's a special place in hell for those schemes, in my opinion, anyway. But so that's the first thing is stay out of debt. Don't even get into it. Just stay out of it. Avoid it. So learn to live without debt. The second thing is just save a little every day, in a way that you don't even think about it, right? And the best way to do that is actually KiwiSaver, because if you save $20 a week into KiwiSaver, the government will give you $10 a week for free, right? 50% return as an adult, between 18 and 65. So every adult must have a KiwiSaver account, even if you're putting $20 a week in. And so just those little saving habits, I'll give you an example. This is my Get Rich Slowly scheme. Would you like to hear this?
Yeah.
It's super easy, right? This is what I do with my kids, by the way. I save the value of a cup of coffee a day into their KiwiSaver account. And the reason I do a cup of coffee is because it adjusts with inflation over time, right? So you're automatically inflation indexing your savings, because a cup of coffee changes with how rich we get, right? Cup of coffee a day. If you stick that into the sorted calculator, it says from the day they're born, by the time they're 25, they'll have about $80,000 in their KiwiSaver. That's a house deposit. Straight away, cup of coffee a day. Don't even think about it, right? Just set it up and don't even think about it. That's into a standard KiwiSaver growth fund. Even with the high fees that our competitors charge, you still end up with $80,000, right? And then if you held on to that to 65, that's $655,000. Now that's just so just a little bit of saving every day and forget about it. I think that's the second thing. So stay out of debt, a little bit of savings, invest in education. Don't underestimate. The world belongs to the educated, not the ignorant, right? So get in there and do what you do well. The other thing, this is what I'd say about occupations generally, it's a very competitive world out there, right? Generally, the people who do well are the people who are doing it for love and working hard. But you will want to work hard because you love what you do, right, as a general rule. So just be good at whatever you do, right? It doesn't matter what that occupation is. The very best at every occupation do incredibly well in life with money. Best hairdressers get paid a lot of money, right? The best nurses get paid a lot of money. The best tradies get paid a lot of money. So that's good. And there's some other things in the book there about sort of minor stuff, but that's the real basic stuff. But overarching all of that is realizing that you are completely capable of taking control of your life with money. You do not have to let it rule you. You can rule it.
Where can people get the book?
Oh, look, we just go to our website and ask for it. That's fine. It'll be downloadable very soon for free. I think about 120,000 copies got distributed via bookshops last month. Look, we're on a mission to demystify money. Our industry will hate this because usually with this, that means you're not going to end up buying a whole lot of expensive financial products. You're just going to, the most important thing you should do with $1, if you've got a spare $1, is pay down debt. Don't even buy anything. Just get rid of financial products out of your life. Don't include more. Don't take on more credit cards or whatever. So you can just get, and then it'll be on our website. Our members will get it for free, So we'll make it widely. We're translating into Te Reo right now, so that'll be available shortly. And so it's just a part of an ongoing mission. But we've got decades to get this right. So we'll work out what works and do it that way.
So cool, Sam. And as a final thought, what will success be for you and for Simplicity?
Well, Simplicity's, I'm just one of the custodians at the start, right? So we're just 6 years into a 100-year journey. So Simplicity, if it fulfills its potential, I think will be, this may sound quite ambitious, but so far so good. It will be the biggest financial institution in the country. It'll be bigger than any bank because ultimately it will be the most trusted brand name in New Zealand, and people will entrust us with our money, and it's ultimately that money that builds any bank or any financial institution. It may also be the biggest homeowner in the country and home builder in the country, because if you think about that, not only are there great returns from that, but also, from our point of view as a social enterprise, the ultimate cliff, the ultimate fence at the top of the cliff in terms of social problems is a warm, dry housing. Housing security is a human right. And if we can help provide that, we should. And that stops us having to fund all of these ambulances at the bottom of the cliff, which we currently do with our foundation. Women's refuge, food parcels, all of these things. A warm, dry, secure housing prevents a lot of social problems. So that would be cool if we were if we help change the housing market, and I think we can with the many billions of dollars that members will entrust us with. And then also, I'd like it to be the biggest charity in the country as well. So if we take a little bit of what we get paid and we put that in, and there's a lot of ideas we have in that area too, in terms of getting New Zealanders in touch with their charitable hearts, and they're very charitable hearts. New Zealanders are awesome givers, So how do we do that? So I think, and those are just our ideas right now. The next team that takes over when we leave, who knows what they will do. And that's just about social enterprise, man. That's just about tapping into people's better angels. And, people's better angels in business are a beautiful match, actually. You really can make money and do good. And we've seen that with Southern Cross. We've seen that with a whole lot of social enterprises all around the world. You're beginning to see it with us.
Yeah, and you've got the track record to show now as well that you're not losing. Often there's a well, you can help this nice thing by joining, and you won't have the returns you get elsewhere. But it's a win-win. You've got industry-leading returns over the longest term.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, it's a challenge, mate, to be honest with you, because a lot of people think business is business and business about making money, and then they think charity is charity, right? So people have quite separate pockets. It's a hard story to tell people that actually you can have both, as long as that you really can do both, but you really can.
Yeah, well, you really can. By giving up the personal profit margin for the people at the top, which is what you've done. And cutting out the banks who are making so much money as well. So if you thought about I used to sort of jokingly call Simplicity the great Aussie bank profit repatriation machine, right? So they're lovely people working in the banks, but they've got a business model which has been exploitative for a long time, and they just can't get out of that model, right? So that they will not change naturally. There will be a process of destruction that happens, and it will be creative destruction, as happens with all industries that are fundamentally exploitative. Ultimately, the truth catches up with them, and then there'll be. We will just be one, I'm predicting, of many successful social enterprises. I think the smartest of this new generation coming through are going to decide that they just want to get paid fairly and do a hell of a lot of good, and then they will realise, you know what, let's call it the business model is a great way of achieving that. So rather than going and work for a charity, I mean, look what I did. I planted trees for a year when I left and decided I wanted to give back, and then I realised I'm just a labourer. Actually, the best thing I can do is set up a business. In every respect, we are a business, and a very competitive, driven business. We just don't want to make money for ourselves, and that is a very powerful. That's the simplicity magic, because that's what gets all the volunteers, the brightest minds, the most energy, people turning up early and leaving late, all that sort of stuff, because they really do feel as if they're making an impact. And I think, talking to the younger generation, but equally, actually everybody really, everyone wants their lives to stand for something and do good, right? And if they can get paid a fair salary along the way, that's kind of magical. Thank you so much, Sam Stubbs, CEO and one of the co-founders at Simplicity, for sharing the story today. Ngā mihi.
Thank you.
Thank you to you for listening, having us along in your ears, and for everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer, Te Aihe Butler. Do follow Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to rate and leave a review if you like what we do. And if you have any suggestions for people that you'd like to hear on Business is Boring, hit me up on Twitter at Simon_Pound with people you'd like to hear from. E nohora.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.